Channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about a very interesting statement that was made by the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. He stated that Ukraine offers Russia to meet next week for talks. That was stated by Zelensky. Ukraine proposed Russia to hold a new round of negotiations next week, Zelensky said after a meeting with Secretary of National Security Umerov. So this is a very important statement because I would like to remind you that Zelensky never starts negotiation process without having good and strong cards, basically without having strong negotiation positions. But when talking about the current situation on the ground, Ukrainians suffer huge losses. They're losing almost everywhere, which means that his readiness to begin the talks most likely means that Zelensky either is ready to begin attacking Russia deep inside with the, let's say, cruise missile of Western production, or Zelensky is ready to launch another adventure somewhere along the line of combat contact. So let's discuss in details the current situation and let's try to understand what exactly Zelensky is going to do before the beginning of the third round of talks. And first let's talk about the Sumy direction, where, as we know, heavy clashes are taking place for the settlement of Kondratovka. We continue receiving different updates about the situation on the ground. According to pro-Russian resources, the Ukrainians are sending more and more forces in this area with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement, but we still see that the Russians hold their positions. The Russians are not going to retreat, and most of the attacks that were carried out by the Ukrainians were repelled. But at the same time, we have two important updates. The first one was published by the neutral mappers, and according to them, the Russians lost some positions to the east of the settlement of Kondratovka. And basically, when talking about this configuration of the front line, this is, for example, the situation by the end of the 19th of July, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 20th of July. And when talking about this configuration of the front line, it seems that the Russians were caught in cauldron by the Ukrainians. At the same time, several pro-Russian resources reported that they managed to restore control over the western and the northwestern parts. As for now, we're not going to adjust the map based on the pro-Russian resources without any proofs. We're going to keep the map as is. Furthermore, we have another very important video from the northern part, and in this video we can see the consequences of very heavy clashes for this area, and we can see the Ukrainian flag that was established on some construction that was attacked by Russian FPV drone. This is a very important video because I would like to point your attention that this flag wasn't established by a drone, because we see that this flag, according to these constructions, were established most likely by a soldier, by a Ukrainian soldier, which means that Ukrainians indeed managed to get at least this part of the settlement. And the Russians, as you can see, destroyed the flag not also by a soldier, but by FPV drone. So most likely clashes are still continue, and the situation will just worsening both for the Russians and for the Ukrainians. At the same time, we got another very interesting update from the area of the settlement of Miropolia. During the previous days, some neutral mappers adjusted their maps in this side as well. According to them, the Ukrainians managed to send some forces and to secure a small forest to the west of the settlement of Kucherov. So this small forest was taken by the Ukrainians, and now it's the question about another adventure that Ukrainians can carry out in coming days before the beginning of the third round of talks. So maybe the Ukrainians will try to attack in this area because there is a huge forest in the area of Gaptavka. Maybe the Ukrainians will try to move further in the direction of Kondratovka. So as for now, it's just speculations, and the only probable thing that plays in the favor of the speculations is that Zelensky is ready for the third round of talks. Now let's move further. And let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction. We have several adjustments and some changes on the ground. In the Liman area, the Russians, according to information we have, improved their positions around the settlement of Grekovka. During the previous week, almost every single day, we were adjusting the map in this area, and according to previous updates, the Russians were moving exactly between the villages of Grekovka and Novoekonomichne in the northwestern direction. We see that the Russians continue this process, and it seems that the Russians first of all are going to maintain this pocket, to cut this pocket basically, and to shorten the lines before the beginning of offensive operation in the direction of Cherneshina. Now let's talk about the city of Siversk. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that during the previous days and since the beginning of July we got too many icons from this area, and yesterday we made a conclusion that most likely the next days we are going to receive significant changes on the ground, and we had them during the previous 12 hours. I would like to remind you that just yesterday we got several videos where we could see how Russians were attacking the city of Siversk with all type of calibers they have. They were bombing the settlement with FAPs, with artillery, with TOS and thrower systems, and it seems that the Russians were preparing themselves before the beginning of another full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to take under control maybe at least the settlement of Serebryanka, maybe even to answer the city of Siversk. And this is, for example, the map, the configuration of the map by the end of the 19th of July of 2025. As for the beginning of the 20th of July, we have changes. First of all, we adjusted the territory to the west and the northwest of Verkhnykamensk in Ukrainian favor based on the report of different pro-neutral mappers. We colored these territories as the areas under complete Ukraine control because since the beginning of the battle for Siversk, we haven't received even a single report that can confirm the Russian control over this territory. So basically, we just rewinded the situation back. At the same time, according to neutral mappers and according to pro-Ukrainian resources, the Russians improved their positions to the south of Verkhnykamensk, and as we can see, the battle of Novoselka has begun. So maybe the village is already have been already taken by the Russians. We need additional days, additional information, but it seems that the Russians currently are focused to maintain the lines to the south of Verkhnykamensk, to the west of Ivanodarivka, and to the north of Vimka. So they are focused to take under control this pocket and to shorten the distance to the southern part of the Siversk when moving along the railways. Now let's talk about the most important area. We are going to talk about Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka arc. First, let's talk about the city of Chasov-Yar. During the previous 24 hours, several changes on the ground were recorded. According to information we have, the Russians improved their positions in the city of Chasov-Yar itself, in the southern part, in the Shevchenko micro-district. Basically, the entire micro-district was secured completely by the Russians according to different mappers, and according to the same resources, the Russians answered the southern micro-district by the name of Yuzhny. Also, the Russians improved their positions. We adjusted this map long time ago with some contested area according to pro-Russian resources, but just today we got reports from neutral mappers. At the same time, very reliable pro-Russian resources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to answer the village by the name of Maiskaya, and that currently there are very heavy clashes for this territory. The Russians, according to this article, secured not just the southern part of Maiskaya, but also the Russians managed to secure this dense network of the fortifications. So it seems that now the Russians are going to maintain their lines also between the settlements of Maiskaya, Markova, and Novomarkova, and with this foothold, the Russians will be able to advance further in the northwestern direction, probably towards the city of Kramatorsk or towards the settlement by the name of Drushkovka, with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Konstantinovka and to create the similar situation to the situation in the area of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Now let's talk about the southern part of the Kliban-Byksky pocket. We have the most important updates from this area. During the previous 24 hours, several resources, both pro-Russian and neutral mappers, reported that the village of Yablunovka was taken by the Russians completely. When talking about neutral mappers, we have some changes in the central part of the settlement. When talking about pro-Western resources and pro-Russian resources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation secured completely the settlement of Yablunovka, and the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense in the area of the village of Alexandra Kalinova. The pro-Ukrainian resources reported that Yablunovka and central Alexandra Kalinova were lost. So it seems, and most likely today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will provide us additional report about the situation in this area, and based on this report, we will adjust everything inside of this pocket. If this information is correct, then the Russians secured not just two settlements, strategical settlements in this area. The Russians managed to cut and cordon completely the contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine along the river of Kryvyi Terets between the settlements of Sherbinovka, Katerinovka, and Kliban-Byk. Because I would like to remind you, the only road of 522 is under complete fire control from the Russian side. So, and most likely after the collapse of the southwestern parts of these Kliban-Byksky pocket, the Russians will concentrate their efforts to secure the southeastern part of the same pocket. Now let's talk about the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The Russians continue tightening the news around the settlement. The settlement of Rodinska is under complete fire control. The Russians are reducing the settlement to ruins because they understand that the main supply chains are going exactly through this area. So that is why the Russians are not going to leave any chances for Ukrainians for successful evacuation, rotation, or supply and support. At the same time, the Russians are moving towards the same settlement. For example, let's compare the map between the dates for the better understanding of the situation. This is the configuration of the map by the end of the 19th of July. The Russians, according to different mappers, managed to shorten the gray zone between the settlement of Novoekonomichne and Mirne. The Russians managed to secure completely the village by the name of Fedorovka, and the Russians improved their positions in the village of Novotoretska. So these are the changes according to different mappers between the dates. And now these are the changes themselves. The gray zone was secured by the Russians. The Russians, according to pro-Ukrainian resources, secured the village of Fedorovka, and the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Novotoretska. And all these days, all these hours, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement of Rodinska. So it's now we have no doubts that after 3 or 4 or 5 days of clashes in the northeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, now we have no doubts that this flank collapsed completely. And now the Russians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose to destroy another flank of the armed forces of Ukraine. We're talking about this time the southwestern flank, because the Russians during the previous 24 hours also improved their position significantly, and now they're trying to shorten the distance or even to enter the southwestern part with the main purpose, to pin down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to use their reserves and reinforcements flexibly. So we have several geolocations that confirm Russian presence in the area of Zerova, and that the Russians managed to secure another stronghold in this area. We're talking about this company stronghold, and the Russians secured another stronghold in the vicinity of the settlement of Novoekonomichne. There are very heavy clashes for this territory, and these clashes are going to continue for the next probably weeks or months. And let's talk about the South Donetsk direction and the Dnipropetrovsk area. As you can see, after a very long operational pause, we start receiving updates about additional and significant changes on the ground. Based on all changes we got during the previous 24 hours, it seems that the Russians decided to finish completely the battle for the pockets between the settlements of Goryokhova and Novoekonomichne. So this pocket is being attacked by the Russians from different directions, and during the previous hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. So once again, the Russians are advancing in the direction of the border with the city of Dnipro, and the Russians are trying to secure this pocket. This will allow them to improve their logistics between positions, different positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, Russian Federation. Furthermore, the Russians began offensive operation in the direction of Filia from the southwest and from the southeast. During the previous 24 hours, once again, according to different sources, additional additional changes on the ground were recorded. This is the situation around Filia. This is the situation in the pocket. As you can see, both directions have significant changes. As for the South Donetsk direction or Gulay Pole area, during the previous 24 hours, several mappers adjusted their maps, but we are waiting for additional updates and additional reports from different, more or less reliable sources. The situation remains tense for Ukrainians. Zelensky is ready for something, obviously not for the third tour of talks. He is ready for another adventure, as I understand. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching.